All right, Corvette exhaust mod bypass. So I've had this car for about 3 years. When I first got it, it had a Borla Stinger or something. I'm not even sure which one it was. After about a year of driving it, I almost sold the car. And I said, what is it that I love the way the car looks. I like the handling and the performance, but something about it, I don't like driving it. And upon thinking about it, it became obvious pretty quick. It was the drone, the exhaust noise, especially the drone. And I hated it, so I tore it off and I sold it for around, I think, $600, figuring that knew it was around $1,000. Put the stock exhaust on for the last 2 years, and I like it quite a bit. I do want it a little nastier when I get on it, and I came across the exhaust mod bypass and read a lot about it on the different forums, and a lot of people seem happy with it. It doesn't seem to have any drone, or not much drone, but a little more nasty when you get on it. So I think I'm going to give it a whirl. Worst thing that happens, I don't like it, I can undo it, but hopefully that's not the case because most people tend to like it. So let's get started. The first step, let's do a before sound so we get an idea what the idle is before. Okay, we got the Corvette up on the lift. Now, I'm not sure how high you gotta lift this thing up to get the exhaust out. It loops around like the rear axle shafts. I think I read somewhere 40 inches, but you might want to check on that if you're going to do it yourself, how high you got to get it up if you don't have access to a lift. If you want a good home lift, this is the Max Jacks lift, and I've got another video that goes through the review of it. Basically, if you don't have one and you've ever wanted a lift, I would highly recommend it. But for removing the exhaust, I'm going to start with one side, and basically there's just 2 bolts up in here that you can see that hold the muffler on. And then if you follow the pipe around the axle that I just talked about, there's 2 more bolts right here. This one's leaking a little bit, as you can see by the carbon, but it doesn't really matter. You don't hear it. So this really should literally take about 5 minutes or less to get the exhaust on the one side off. Okay, so we've got the factory one half of the Corvette exhaust on the ground here. So what the bypass mod does is exactly the way it sounds. We're going to cut a hole here, cut a hole here, drill a hole, and then we're going to attach this piece of stainless steel pipe. This is 1.25 inch. I've read people say anywhere between 1.25 and 1.75 works well. I'm going to trust everything I've read on the forums, and I'm going to go with 1.25 because I maybe wanted a little quieter. I've got my piece cut, and I've got my holes marked on the exhaust to drill. Important to note, spend a lot of time grinding and fitting your piece just right, because you don't want big gaps to try to fill with weld. That's never a good idea. It'll burn back, and it just makes for a crappy looking weld. So get it ground and spend enough time grinding it so it's perfect. I traced my lines on the pipe so I know where to cut. One thing to note, see how I've got the exhaust, the muffler I should say, up in the air. When I'm drilling and cutting and everything into here, I don't want the metal shavings and chunks getting wedged into the exhaust muffler. If I have it this way, gravity will pull it down and I'll be able to get the chunks out the exhaust. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting now. Alright, now we got the holes cut and we got our piece fit. So what we'll do is we'll get that aligned perfectly. I've cleaned the area. You always want to have nice clean steel when you weld. So I'll go ahead and get it perfectly situated, cleaned, and start welding. Okay, I've gone ahead and burned it in here. And you can see it's just, again, we're bypassing, I don't know, probably 1/4 of the exhaust and hopefully just the right notes. We'll see in a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and throw this back on. Alright, took about 2 minutes to put it back up. I did have to take the sway bar down 4 bolts. Just hang it down in order to twist the pipe around to get it out. It's not a big deal. Got this put back in. We did one side for now. If it sounds perfect and what I'm looking for, there's no real need that I can think of to do the other side. If it's an improvement but not quite loud enough, I'll go ahead and do this side as well. So let's go ahead and start it up, and hopefully it's the sound that I'm looking for. Okay, here's the sound afterwards. Seems a little bit louder, a little more aggressive. We're going to have to take it for a drive and see under full throttle if it's the sound I'm looking for or not. So stay tuned.